Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. We're so glad that you are with us on today. Didn't you like the way I kind of eased out of that?
Yeah.
Race in America. We're in the studio today. You see me and my buddy, my main guy over here. He's the main guy anymore. Mark Bassett is on hiatus. He's
abandoned us.
He's abandoned us, but he'll be back. He's taking care of business. He's a very important man, a VIP. But I have John B. at the place B with us on today. John, what's good, my man?
Hello.
John, how have you been doing and navigating the changes that are happening in the world, in the community, but also with the weather?
The weather's been rough. Like the allergies have been getting to me. The fall weather is here. I love fall weather. I love sweater weather. I love long sleeves. It's my favorite time, but my sinuses take some time to adjust.
Sinuses, allergies, all of the itchy, wheezy, runny stuff is happening, and it has not been fun whatsoever. And those of you who are out there listening to this, when you hear this, I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. Can you hear it in my voice?
I can hear it in you, yeah.
Man, people are saying, "Oh, you're putting on your deep voice." I'm like, no, I'm trying to get the words out. It's a crazy thing that feels like not my breath, but there's like this big lump in the back of my throat that I'm trying to push and breathe over there, and it's been this way for a while, but it's absolutely driving me crazy. I'm going bonkers. Have you ever had that ear itch where you can't get to it? You don't know if it's in your nose or in your ear, but it's too far for you to be able to get to.
Don't use Q-tips, whatever you do.
But I have to.
Yeah, me
when
too.
Do you do that?
Yeah.
I just put them in there just to feel it like I'm scratching.
Yeah.
To get better. I hate that I hate that feeling, but it's a part of this season, and like it or not, we do live in a state or area of the country that gets 4 seasons, which I absolutely love the 4 seasons. But I've been playing taps to summer. I want summer to come back. We have been really blessed with warm weather for an extended period of time. But I think old man fall is getting ready to slap us in the face in the next couple of weeks. But we're going to make it through. I want to talk today. We're going to just talk about some of the hot topics. We have had so much taking place. Have you been having conversations, or have conversations just been popping up about ICE, about the government, about the Republicans, about the Democrats? Have you been having those conversations or hearing those conversations all over the place?
Yeah, I've been hearing them. Mostly it's the National Guard thing that's gotten people.
What's been what you've been hearing?
Sending in National Guard to cities under the guise of controlling crime.
How do you feel about that, John?
I think it's stupid. Like, no, it's a bad move for the country. It's not the right way to go about things, especially like if those states requested assistance, absolutely do that. If it were that state's National Guard, okay, I get that. Send in the Michigan National Guard to Detroit, whatever. I do not like the idea of bringing the Texas National Guard to Chicago.
What do you see as the difference? And that's
we've talked about community policing before, where police living in the communities that they work in.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
You look at the Roman Empire, when they had to put down a rebellion, they wouldn't bring in those military forces that were raised in that region. They'd bring it in from 3 former countries over.
Explain why that is. Because that's a great point. Why?
Because if I'm supposed to suppress my neighbor, I'm less likely to do it. If I'm supposed to suppress somebody's neighbor in Idaho, I'm more likely to not really have an issue with that. That's just what I'm supposed to do.
So it's interesting. Very good thought point, perspective on that. I think it's interesting. What do you think is the motivation behind what we're seeing with the National Guard?
I don't know. I think it's kind of one of those strong arm tactics when it comes to the federal administration of, look at us, we're strong, we're powerful, we can lay down the law when we need to. I also think the reaction of, no, everything's fine from those cities and states is wrong. No, everything is not fine. Stop pretending it is. But at the same time, I've heard the justification that the National Guard is being brought in to protect ICE agents. But that's not the reason that's been given. The reason that's being given is to control crime in these cities. And really what they end up doing is walking around picking up litter. These National Guard troops. It's a bad look.
It's interesting. And but when you said that, it made me think about it, because I had my own thought as to, like, I'm looking at the cities that that the National Guards have been sent to, and I'm also looking at how things are playing out contextually, and I think that there was a lot of conversation by this administration about them doing this before they actually did it. One thing I told y'all, the thing that I like about Donald Trump is the fact that when Donald Trump says he's going to do something, he does it. He's never going to do it. It's against the law. He does it anyway. Or
he tries to.
Yeah. And so there's a weird thing in there somewhere on the inside that I don't like much about what he's doing at all. As a matter of fact, it's hard for me to find anything, but I like people when they say that they're going to do something and they attempt to do what they said. And it's weird because I don't agree with what he's talking about in this particular situation, but you understand what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So when I look at that and I look at the cities that he's been sending into, crime reduction in cities like Chicago, they were on a downward trend. Also, DC at a 30-year low in terms of crime. How do you justify going in to save the people from the ruckus and the rigmarole that those cities have been doing a good job in terms of getting those numbers in the opposite direction?
That's debatable. I'm saying
in the right direction. In the right direction. That's the statement.
Yeah.
Because crime, we're never going to end crime, right? And we're never going to end things like gun violence and those things, but we can. I'm a person who believes in community violence intervention, that the populations in the communities where violence exists are probably best and have a great understanding on how those things should be handled. So when I see things like what took place, I take markers on the cities that these happen. And I did something, most people, initially I was thinking, these are all democratic cities. And then I also did something else.
Most cities are.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what I did with those cities is I looked at what are the cities that have the highest populations of African-American, just curious, of African-Americans. And the cities that we're looking at percentage-wise are the cities. We look at LA being the number one. It's the highest percentage, and that's sheer by population numbers. Then we look at Washington, D.C., which nickname is Chocolate City. And then we look at Baltimore, because that entire DMV area over there. Every time I would hear people say DMV, this is completely off the record, I would always think about Department of Motor Vehicles.
That's what I hear, yeah.
But we're talking about Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area over there. And so I look at that, and then I looked at the next city being Chicago. And as I was looking at that, I was like, okay, so when is Atlanta and Detroit? And then there's, cities in Mississippi actually that have very high populations of things of African Americans. And so to me, and someone say, hey, you're reaching, but I look at that and I look at the populations. Do you remember at the beginning of this when ICE was going in, and I was sharing how many folks in the Hispanic community, the Mexican American Latino community, were like, where are the black people? Do you remember me having that kind of and I said the black people were at home like, this ain't our fight. This is not what this is not what we're doing. We didn't vote for this man. But the Hispanic Latino population overwhelmingly had. And you've heard the stories of buyer's remorse when they look at what's going on, especially the group that were, was it Latinos for Trump? And their spokesperson was out, we're going to vote and Trump's going to do this and he's going to do all these things. And then she was one of the individuals that was, quote unquote, harassed by ICE. And then she said, this is not what we voted for. Well, In many places in America, people think that this is what you voted for because this is exactly what he said he was going to do. Maybe not the manner, and I think that this would be your argument, Jonathan. And I say this: I'm not for illegal immigrants coming in and having benefits that American citizens should have. But I do believe that there is a sense, and let me know what you think about this. I believe that there is a sense of, I don't know if the word decorum or care that should be given to folks, even if they are immigrants and they find themselves in this country illegally or legally. I think there is a sense of decorum and a particular sense of care that we have to use. What are your thoughts about that? Or that we should use? We don't have to.
First of all, I want to address the cities that are being
Okay.
targeted
Yeah,
in
go ahead.
that comment. I think you're reaching a little bit. The justification that's being used is crime rate. And I think if you look at those cities, crime rate is highest in those cities as well. So it's correlation is not causation, is kind of my caution there.
I'd give you that. And I said
Yep.
that might be your thought,
Yep.
but go ahead.
But when it comes to how we treat illegal immigrants,
Can we take that? Can I respond to that
Yeah.
first and then
Yeah,
we come back? Because I'm looking at some of the cities that have more violence or high levels of violence are actually cities that fall in Republican areas. When we look at cities in Mississippi and cities in Arkansas and those other countries, those other cities, I sound like one of those social media. It's another country, but those other cities. And so I'm waiting for those same National Guards to be sent into those cities in southern regions, which actually have higher incidents of certain types of crime than some of the cities that they've been into. But that's neither here nor there. That was just one of the things. But you can either respond to that or you can go to your next point, which I find interesting.
Next point, when it comes to how we treat illegal immigrants, yeah, I understand that they are a different. When I say class, I don't mean like societal class, but I mean this is women and children who cross the border illegally. But at the same time, these are people who broke the law. We treat people who broke the law a certain way.
What do we elect a president?
Not super well.
I'm just like you ran and you walked into it.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm listening. That was a low one, but I'm just saying.
So by a certain standard, I can understand like this is this kind of person. We shouldn't be treating them. At the same time, they broke the law. If you break the law, there's a certain amount of decency that you can expect, and there's a certain amount of decency that you can not expect. I think a big part of this,
what does that mean, Jonathan? Because that is a very loaded statement when you say that.
I have very little sympathy for criminals.
Okay.
That's what that means.
Okay.
I understand that some of these people aren't here voluntarily. Think of kids that got brought across by their parents. They didn't mean to break the law, but there's they shouldn't be separated from their parents thing. It's a sticky and nuanced conversation.
What do you think about that? You said that. I mean, but
no.
How do you feel about that?
I think illegal immigrants have been given too much grace up to this point.
Okay.
And
there's a lot of pause in this conversation.
There is a lot of pause. I haven't fully thought through
vetted the thought
where I'm at on this because the treatment of illegal immigrants is not something that's considered. Think of how they're treated when they enter illegally and they gain access to certain resources and things and are pointed to certain cities. Here, you'll be safe, why shouldn't they be loaded up into a bus, driven back to the border and told don't come back? Why is that wrong? Why is how they're being extradited wrong?
Okay, so and I'm not against that. I'm not against the fact that anyone who entered into the country illegally should not be here, should be returned. I think that they should be returned to the country that they crossed the border in, instead of being shipped to. I'm going to ship you to Venezuela. No hablo English.
Yeah.
And when you get there, so I think that those are important points. But I also think now this is why I find this so fascinating, because the same people who feel very even more staunch than you feel, there is an element of sympathy and empathy that you express. Well, no, you're like, they're gonna get the law, but the same people who are lacking empathy as it relates to these foreigners in our country are the same people who are thumping people upside the head with Bibles, saying that Christianity is key. And when I look at the
Not
Bible,
all of them.
well, a very large number of these folks. And so when I look at the Word of God, there is actually very clear examples of what the Bible talks about foreigners that have come into your land. And these are people that are not a part of your country. And this is biblically speaking. So
You're talking Old Testament Levitical law.
absolutely. But there's a way that we treat those individuals. Actually, anything that happens in the Old Testament, when we get to the New Testament, is magnified in meaning. If I told you don't commit adultery in the New Testament because spirit is inside of us, it is now a situation where you don't even look at her. And it's because we now have his spirit on the inside. So that should be one of the governing principles that lead us. So I'm confused by, what is it and how can we have say that, it's God's way and we're, it's a Christian nation and we need to be that way. And then we don't follow those same principles that we say that we love so much.
Because the Levitical law laid down the rules for the children of Israel
Absolutely.
on how they were to conduct themselves as a people.
Absolutely.
That is the old covenant, and that is
Absolutely.
what those laws were being laid out. In the New Testament, it is the new covenant. There are it basically it transcends the peoplehood, it transcends the just for the nation of Israel.
Okay.
I understand the application of, well, we're supposed to love our neighbor. And how did Jesus talk about the Samaritans who were outcasts and the foreigner in that case? You can love your neighbor, but at the same time, to the law, to the nations of man, God has given the sword of the law to uphold order. And we are a nation of laws. We have rules, we have borders. We do welcome foreigners into our midst if they follow our laws.
Okay, so is it a breach of law if the first lady of our nation is here on a visa that based upon the visa type, the Einstein visa, that she doesn't qualify for? Is that a breach of law, or is that an exception or an expansion of law based upon our affinity or our love of a particular group of people or a particular person in that particular situation? Because they got their visas pretty quickly, her coming into this nation. And so either laws apply to all of the people in the land, or they shouldn't apply to anyone. And if we can make an exception in one particular situation, then I think we can extend exceptions in other places. And let me be clear about this.
I'm not saying no one abuses our laws.
Okay.
That happens.
Okay.
Think of all the tax loopholes that keep billionaires billionaires.
Well, I'm thinking about the ones that were passed that are trying to be in this big beautiful bill. But that's another question. I want to get to this because it's, to me, and I said this before, and this is something that I have really have struggled with since 2020, since the social unrest and the social justice cries on one side, and back the police, black the blue on one side. I've always been, my entire family has been paramilitary or law enforcement. So
I think you just mean military, not paramilitary.
Paramilitary, yeah, military.
That's something different.
And they've been parachuting, military, and like a part of the law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
And so I was using the term in terms like that's not military, but it's military-esque.
I see.
But anyways, and so I've always, I think, been an individual who has respected, and I think that the phrase is, I wanted everyone to get home safe. I remember doing a commercial about 15 years ago, and it was about, police officers and community people. Everyone wants to get home safely. But I struggle with a number of the things that I see taking place and how we view certain aspects of people. And so we gave the example of, I gave the example of Melania, First Lady Trump, as an immigrant and her family, not just her, but her and her family getting these rush visas as immigrants, and they get a particular way of treatment. Technically, she was here on an expired visa when she came over as a model or whatever she was doing. And so they corrected the situation. They're rounding up people with similar situations and taking them across the border. How do we account for the difference in how we handle those situations?
Different people have different statuses, and
So status matters.
Oh yeah, and they abuse the privilege that comes with those statuses.
So do you think that's good?
No.
Do you think it's fair?
No, but it's the way of things, and it's not unique to one group of people.
Okay. Okay. So I guess
it is what it is. Because Melania Trump is allegedly, I haven't read too much into this, so I'm not going to say definitively.
That's fair.
Because she's allegedly in on an illegitimate visa or whatever, does that mean we shouldn't enforce the laws for other people?
But what it does show is a level of hypocrisy. That's the perfect word. That exists. And you said it best, class, status, and hierarchy. There's a hierarchy system here that is in place that is unfair. There have been teachers, and I was reading one story in one of the major news, I think it was Wall Street or something, that was sharing a story about a young man who was an officer who had grown and ascended, but he was taken back because his visa was illegally before all of these things stopped. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray. Oh, they're calling me now.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. I don't know if you had anything that you want to say about that last piece, because I have something that I do want to bring up that I think is important.
I was paying way more attention to the clock and things. Not that what you're saying isn't
important. I got you. I got you. Because this is the thing I have been saying, and since this is conversations of race in America, I always like to bring these things up because I think that they're necessary conversations. And I was looking at, and I'm looking at this on my phone as well. A young man by the name of Trey Reed. Had you heard about the Trey Reed story?
I have not.
Okay, there's a young man, I believe he was 22, 21, 22, down in Delta State University, Delta State College in Mississippi, who was found hanging from a tree. And this was shortly after the Charlie Kirk situations. I shared with you all on how I'm often confused at how some of the issues that exist in America, I think that Black folks become the targets for when they have nothing to do with it. And the Charlie Kirk situation, we talked about that, and then the attacks that took place or the threats that took place on Black colleges, historically Black colleges and universities that existed. And after that, immediately after that, that first 3-week window, there were I think 3 or 4 different individuals or instances where Black men were found hanging in public places. And so Mr. Reed, Trey Reed, it was one of those young people at Delta State in Mississippi that was found hanging from a tree. And when they did his initial autopsy, they said that it was a suicide. Parents were kind of confused because he was hung with his hands tied behind his back, which makes suicide very interesting. Not just saying that it could not happen. But it was an interesting thing, maybe he had tied his hands or somehow behind his back. Then he got up and then he hung himself. I don't know. Well, you remember Colin Kaepernick?
Yep.
Okay. So our guy, Colin Kaepernick, who took a knee and raised up the fist, like Angela Davis back in the day. She was one of those activists back in the day, for those of you who don't know, who spoke truth to power in terms of the issues that were affecting Black folk. Colin Kaepernick, who was kicked out of the NFL, basically blacklisted for his taking a knee in the NFL, said, "Hey, this looks fishy. I want to pay for a second autopsy." And so he financed a second autopsy, and it was done about the 6th, and details from that autopsy are coming out and have been being shared. And some things that were not found in the initial that have now been released as a part of the second is that the young man, not only was it suspicious, but he also had found, the investigator found that he had suffered from blunt force trauma to the back of the head, a point that wasn't included in the first autopsy. Also, another issue that was not included was the fact that that young man had a belt around his neck that was like 2 or 3 sizes too big for him. So he was also hung by someone else's belt. Not that that makes it anything, but it does once again make it suspicious. In addition to that, the types of markings that were around his neck also were not consistent with someone who was unaliving themselves. And so when we look at that,
I hate that term.
I know, I know, but it's the approach. I guess people are trying to be
It's the
sensitive.
internet way of
It's the
saying it.
internet way of saying things, unaliving oneself. And then also, I think the last piece is that there was an argument. Details have surfaced that there was an argument that this young man had with some other white individuals who were, and the argument was about the situation with Charlie Kirk. Not sure exactly what it was, but it was surrounding those things. And so there was a lot of animus before that happened. We then find this young black man hanging from the tree. So the other situations have kind of mimicked, these situations. People are found in public places hanging, and it gives an ode back to the days of Jim Crow and slavery when black men were hung, as the song Strange Fruit says, like fruit from poplar trees. You hadn't heard any of this stuff going on?
I think I heard the name, but
okay. So these are things when we have these conversations and we look at the things that are taking place, that for Black America, they're very alarming and disheartening, and can sometimes strike an element of fear in a way that other nationalities would not understand. When we were looking at all of the things that were taking place, I told you with those initial, what do you call it, when he signed them into law, executive orders, 300,000 African-American women, black women are now unemployed. Other leaders in particular area now unemployed. And my thought in the beginning of this entire thing, when we were having these conversations, is that this was a targeted effort, and it's really an attack on, it's a racist attack against Black America. That was my thought. And I want to get your opinion. As I look at how these things are continually unveiling, to me, it feels more, I'm almost more convinced that that is what it is. And what we see in the White House, and this is a strong thing, but is a president who is stoking our greatest fears of folks from both sides of this side of the parties, the nation, black and white, but is also pushing forth an agenda that is very racist to me. And so I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
I still think you're reading racism into the policies that are being presented. I don't think it's targeted against Black people in terms of the policies.
Okay.
I'm not saying this attack on this young man
wasn't racist. Right.
But I don't think that has anything to do with what Trump does with his pen.
What doesn't?
The hanging of this young man on.
Do you not think that from the executive desk there is being a stirring of the pot that is stoking racist fears? Do you not? You don't see that?
Not against Black people, if anything, against Hispanics. And I understand that, especially with a lot of the moves that have been made, like we talked about in the first segment. But I don't see targeting of Black people.
Okay. And I can understand that. I can understand you having the experiences that you've had or never had, never really being a target for the most part in that way. I don't know if you've ever experienced overt racism. I don't know. Not having to dwell and to live in Black spaces. So not understanding that very fine, nuanced way that one has to interact in those spaces.
Let me talk on
Go ahead.
that for a minute,
Go ahead.
though,
Go ahead.
because someone my age, as we're growing up, as we're developing and learning how to socialize, everything we say is being scrutinized for racism. Everything we put out there
Okay.
on the internet, in person, whatever, there are 3 or 4 filters that have to be checked off to say, how would this be interpreted in the worst way possible?
Mhm.
At least that's how I go through things, is what I'm about to say, like, is that going to cause problems, especially when I'm with somebody of a different race than me? It's okay. I need to like double check everything I say and the different interpretations that could happen there. I have seen overt racism.
Mhm.
I've seen it. Not necessarily targeted directly at me,
Okay.
but I've been a witness to it, and I've seen subversive racism where someone is actually saying something that they're not saying
Right.
with their
Right.
words, you
Right.
know?
Right.
But there is a certain amount of what you would call code switching when it comes to people my age and how we interact with each other because of the deplatforming of people based on things that they see. There have been public examples of you say the wrong thing, you no longer get a voice. So I think it's unfair to invalidate someone's perspective based on, well, you haven't experienced this.
Well, I think I'm not invalidating it. I'm just saying
Okay.
that you lack the experience of it, and unless you can give me examples of when you have. And so when I look at certain things, I understand that history has a way of repeating itself. And it's not that I'm saying that everything is racist. That's not how I feel. But there are certain things that exist. Even, for example, because if you were looking at what's taking place in Chicago right now, uh, the target, and I said I've been saying this for a long time, and we're getting closer and closer to I believe, the intended target. You can't do anything, I don't think, in order for you to really attack Black people in this country. You have to deal with the issues of immigrants, illegal immigrants in this nation. You have to deal with the others of the nation before you get to the others of African Americans. What we saw in Chicago and what we're seeing in Chicago, Black communities that are being completely uprooted, that are being harassed, whose rights are being overlooked and broken and just kind of completely diminished to get to illegal aliens. And I'm speaking in particular to the one particular apartment complex with the hundreds of people that they woke up and were setting off, the noise cannons and all of the things, zip tying folks and all of this stuff. Some of the stuff that you've seen, if you've been watching online, the zip tying of certain kids and things, some of those things are not true, but were manufactured for social media impact. But the fact that you can violate an entire group of people, they knew who lived in that community if they did their research, that community was largely Black. If we're going to attack those places, guess where most illegal immigrants, if they're not way out in the country, they find themselves in urban populations. And what we see now and what we have been seeing more of more recently is citizens, American citizens, African American descendants of slaves that are now, their rights are being violated to go after illegal immigrants, so to speak.
How so?
Because they're being put to the ground. They're being forced to show that they are Americans. At the same, Black and notice the terminology that we often use is Black and brown. It's because I have Hispanic folk in my family. There are a whole generation of folks that are connected to the Bowen family who are biracial. Some of their initial family members were illegal immigrants. They've come into this country. They've lived in this country. They've intermingled with other people of color. And we now see in cities like Chicago where that barrier of it being brown people is now being crossed because to a darker brown group of people. And there are lawsuits that are being filed. There are people that are making these claims. Hey, I've been arrested. I had my identification. I was taking care of business. I'm thinking about this one man in Chicago, and I was arrested by ICE. They picked me up, took me away, told me to shut up, and then eventually just let me go. That's a violation of our rights. But if we can start with legal violations, then we move to illegal violations. and we continue to put those narratives and those images forward, we as a people become docile to stand up against those types of oppression, which are illegal in this amazing country. And so those are the things that I see. So as a Black man who's experienced racial violence and racial discrimination, I use both terms firsthand. I've lived in places where when I go into white spaces, and you use the term, you have to be concerned about what you're saying, because now, hey, if I say it, they're going to say I'm a racist. But as a Black man, I have to continue to be concerned if, I say certain things, am I going to be offended? In most situations, African Americans don't own platforms like this one that I'm on. They don't own companies that they're in. And so there's always a fear that exists that if I don't become a part of the network, if I say something that makes me otherize, if I speak too strongly to stand up for myself, what does that mean for me? And that is a real piece that, as an African American man, I've had to deal with, and I often deal with on a regular daily basis. My counterparts will say I have a First Amendment right to say this, and in many instances, I say I have a right to say it. But does it really benefit me sometimes if I'm willing to say that? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I think that a lot of the kind of direction things have been heading, especially when we're talking about corporate world, when we talk about DEI and things like this, it is meant to encourage diversity of background. We've talked about this dozens of times on this show. I don't think it is quite to the point anymore that you need to suppress who you are in these spaces, with the exception of those places that are abusing DEI initiatives for the, just checking boxes. If you're just looking to check a box, you don't actually want this person to bring their authentic self. But to those companies, which there are many of in the corporate world, that are full supporters of this DEI thing, I don't think there's as much suppression going on.
I think it's more performative. I think that America
you think it's mostly checking boxes performative?
I think that America, and I'm going to give you a real life understanding of why I feel that way. I think that America understood in some sentences that certain things that they were doing to Black folks, they just could not do anymore. I mean, it no longer could exist. And I think my allies on the other side who have always, because freedoms for Blacks have always come and have always been led in many ways. Black folks have led the way, but it has always come with the support of white allyship. That's the only way that they would have happened. People come to a sense that this is the best way to be human. And if we're human, all people are human. This is how we treat them. However, I think that there are instances in which things like DEI, I think that intentions and how it was meant to be in legislation was one way. And I think a lot of those things were performative. And here's why. Because when I look at who are the CEOs, Blacks are less than 1% of CEOs over a course of 200 years. When I look at the fact that when we now have an administration that says, hey, anything that says Black, anything that says women, anything that says underprivileged, anything that says, and those things, we're going to sanitize. And universities, some universities have fought, but many corporations have ran just, we don't have to do it. And they've abandoned the promises that they've given to Black America because they can, which would make me feel or make me understand that their intention was never was serious. It was because of the intensity or the impact, the need and the nature of the moment,
the incentive.
And it was performative.
Yep.
Because the moment that they could abandon it, we see so many corporations doing that. And so, and the impact, remember, we've been talking about that for a long time. And we've been saying that DEI was to bring a more diverse place into the workspace. And that happened very truly for white women. When I look at this great state of Michigan, I love my state. First of all, I love Michigan. I sometimes struggle with the winter in the beginning, but I get used to it. I love the Four Seasons. I love the people here in Michigan. But when we look at it, when I look at the people who are leading our state, and I look at our governor is a white woman, our lieutenant governor, and you go down,
Our
Secretary.
lieutenant governor is a black
I'm
man.
not. I'm talking about not the lieutenant government,
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State,
Yep.
but also Dana Nessel.
Yep.
So all of these individuals in these key positions are white women. They mimic what DEI has empowered not only in the state of Michigan, but in our nation. And I think that we often make assumptions and we give out statistics that are not consistent with the reality of those things. When we look at what's happening with the government shutdown, and this is a whole conversation for another day, people are thinking, oh, they're going to get those illegal immigrants and they're going to get those black people off those jobs who are sitting there playing. But the majority of people that are going to be impacted are MAGA folk. And I think that and this is what I love. We see Marguerite, I don't know, it's the evolution of Margaret Taylor Greene, with her saying, this is crazy. Like my people and my constituents are going to be impacted. No, I'm not going to. We need to keep healthcare. So I think that she's had an awakening of the reality versus the narrative.
Okay. You turned a corner there at the end.
Go ahead.
I think society,
and I'll let you take us out if you need to.
I think societally, I would agree. In large parts, DEI initiatives have been performative, and we see mass abandonment for that reason. But I think they have pushed societally a shift in understanding to where people don't expect others to suppress who they are outside the workplace. I understand in the workplace there being top-down expectations, I'll say, and DEI just being kind of a mask. And that's something that people have been saying for years since it's been implemented, that this is just checking boxes, this is performative. But I think societally there is less of a need to suppress who you are.
Do you really believe that?
I do.
I believe that we have come, we have made some strides, but I want you to keep in mind the Crown Act here in America. You know what that is?
Yep.
Okay. So the Crown Act is something that within the last 5 years has just become a thing. Why had it become necessary to fight for Black people being able to wear the hair that naturally comes out of their head? We're talking about progress, but this is a very real, recent thing for Black people to show up a little bit more 100% themselves.
There's a difference between being allowed to, by like, the government is not going around checking hairstyles. The Crown Act,
CEOs are.
Yes, the Crown Act was against the discrimination based on it. I understand it's semantics to a certain degree, but it's an important distinction to make. The finish of my thought from before was, yes, I think there's less of a need to suppress at the cost of, now everybody needs to be careful what they say, because your image, your reputation is on the line in a very public way.
Well, I would agree to some degree, because I think we do need to be more mindful. I think that we should be mindful in general. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to throw this out there. And if we need to, I'm going to take a couple seconds and give it to you. I think that we're reversing that order. And I think that we're becoming more emboldened in saying things boldly out loud that we normally wouldn't. I didn't want to talk about it right at this moment, but the Republicans saying things in chats, say it once, okay. Continue to say it, it becomes problematic. So I think that we're saying quiet parts out loud again. I'll let you take us out on this break. Go ahead.
My thought on that, young people saying stupid things in private chats is nothing new. They weren't saying it. It wasn't meant to be published, but it's unacceptable.
So if I'm privately racist, is that different? If I'm racist in private? If I'm racist in private, then I create policy in public that goes along with what I think.
I haven't seen the full context of the chats. I don't know if it was in a joking way. I know I've said things in private chats that I don't want to see the light of day. I'm not saying that I'm saying what they said, but yeah.
Okay. So that's a whole nother conversation for another minute.
Yeah.
I hate when we get into those conversations. We got to end this show, but we'll be back next week with more United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. God bless you all. Grace and peace.